Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Resilient Aging Unfiltered podcast. So happy to be here today with Karen Archibald. I've known Karen for several years since, first meeting her when she was working for my medical school, University of Arizona in Phoenix. And then when her and her husband, Robin, came and I was helping with his Alzheimer's, hopefully supporting both of them. So we'll hear more about that. But thank you so much for being here today, Karen.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share Robin's and my journey with Alzheimer's and anything else that can be helpful.
Great. Well, maybe I'll just start with giving a brief bio about Karen. She was born and raised in Milwaukee, Minnesota, and she met her husband, Robin, when she was 17, and they married when she was 20. Throughout her life, she worked in administration in the medical and healthcare field, and she retired officially at age 72. She was always a devoted care partner to her husband, Robin, until his passing in March of 2023 after 60 years of marriage. Wow, you don't hear that very often. Karen brings a deeply personal perspective on the Alzheimer's journey. Robin, her husband, came from a family profoundly affected by dementia, and after his diagnosis in 2013, Karen walked beside him through every stage. And along the way, she learned to balance his needs with her own, drawing strength from education, community, and her Christian faith. With the support of her sons and friends, she found creative ways to inspire Robin, advocated for his dignity, and navigated the transition to memory care. Now, I, as a physician, a memory specialist, was always impressed with so many things about each of you, about Karen, about Robin, about together. Karen, as a care partner, you were so creative and really seemed to have like the perfect disposition and approach with him. And he was always smiling, which I know that was his way, but still, this can get really tough as the disease advances. So I've valued so much that I've learned from you, and I've shared that with other care partners. So I so appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today so that the world can also learn from you.
My pleasure.
So maybe we can start with, so how did you and Robin meet?
I was in my first year of college and I was on my way home. I stayed with a friend and she said, well, there's a party, and she wanted to go and be there for a few minutes. And that's where we saw each other. And we basically connected and started seeing each other. He'd come down to Hamline University. I'd come up to Duluth like there was a basketball game or something like that. So we connected that way. So that was the beginning of our relationship, and it was a long and loving one.
Yeah. So can I ask, like, what attracted you to him initially? What drew you to him?
Well, I'd like to say that I believe he was good looking. I thought that he was most thoughtful and caring. Just, I don't know, I just enjoyed being in his presence. It's a comfort. I think it's like finding your soul partner. You just know it's right. And it just goes from there. So yeah, I would say he was my soul partner. And I would say too that through our relationship, there were lots of ups and downs. And I always called it a 90-10 relationship. When I was first diagnosed with cancer, I was the 10% and he was the 90%. When he developed Alzheimer's, he was the 10% and I was the 90% in the relationship.
It's really fascinating since, we tend to often think about 50-50.
I don't know that it's ever totally
Yeah. That's not the reality. That's very, amazing insights. And can you tell us a little bit about your relationship before his diagnosis, what your life looked like together?
I think it was, basically a good relationship. I'm trying to say common or ordinary, but to us, we just lived our life. He worked, I worked. He worked for major corporations, so he moved around a lot. We had 3 children. We have 2 sons, and then I have a daughter that passed away at 45 from breast cancer. And we just did things together. And after we retired, we got a motorhome and we traveled around a lot and just did a lot of visiting with people. We had a lot of we were very active in our church at the time. And so we were involved in Bible studies and just different things. And I don't know, we just enjoyed our life. Enjoyed our life with our children. Our son, after he graduated from ASU, moved to Ketchikan, Alaska. So we didn't see him as often, or even his daughters, but they would come quite frequently to visit and be, lots of phone calls, that kind of thing. But I know we just had a really good life in moving around, making new friends. I'm still in touch with some of those people that I met early on in our marriage. And in fact, I'm in touch with a friend. Her husband passed away recently, but he worked with Robin. There's just, continuity comes in various forms.
Yeah, I always was struck by your, when I first met you, so I guess he was already 5 years into the diagnosis, but there's always such a calm, easy breeziness between you both, and like light and joyful, but also not superficial, like clearly a deep, deep connection and love and devotion to each other. So that's very special.
I tend to agree with you. We always joked about things. We laughed a lot. Humor was a tool that we used a lot of times between the two of us if there was something that was irritating or whatever. And that just seemed to get us back on track. And I think after you've been married so many years, sometimes I think you feel that you're almost the other person because you know so much about them. And I think that's what makes for me. I know it's different for everybody with their loved one in their Alzheimer's journey. But for me, because we had been close so much, that everything was easy. And we both thought the same way about a lot of things. We both had a strong faith. We both enjoyed our children and our friends and the activities, traveling, just
Yeah.
living a really good life.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. And I honestly haven't heard not many people describe that like that. And so when you stepped into the care partner role, what was that like for you? I think about it like it's a new hat to wear when you have that with your spouse. I'm curious how you conceptualize that as becoming a part of your identity.
I think it may have been a bit easier for me because of the familial part of his family with his dad, his older sister, and
Mhm.
his younger brother, who he had the frontal temporal
Got it.
dementia. And so there was, we were involved with family, so we knew the awareness. I remember one day I was working at the University of Arizona College of Medicine, and my colleague and I were out looking for sites for medical students, and we went to Banner Alzheimer's Institute and met with one of the doctors who ended up being his doctor. And I went home that night, and that's the one thing I miss, is that at the end of the day, you kind of talk about your day. I miss that part. He said, well, so what happened today? And I told him what I did, and he got really quiet, and he said, I think I need to get tested, because he knew his family, and he had seen his dad in a terrible situation. And so that part was easy for me. I think the other thing is, I think God has gifted me with the fact that my mother lived with us for 9 years. She was really fairly healthy, except she had to use the wheelchair when we went out and stuff. And then my daughter had mental health and drug problems. So it was kind of like in many situations, I was playing social worker, trying to, to make sure everybody got to their doctor, got their medication, and I enjoyed it. One of the techniques I used in the doctor's office, and I found this with my mom, and I think some doctors probably still use this. When they see that they're not getting the response from the patient, they look to the care partner. And what I would do is I turn my head to Robin, and I didn't move my head until I could see that the doctor was looking and addressing Robin or my mom, because I think to me the most important thing is their dignity. You cannot take their dignity away from them. And it's hard. I may be jumping around a little bit here, but it's hard at first to let go of the person that you knew, because what you try to do is you try to correct them because you want them to be like they used to be. Well, that's not going to happen. So as soon as you learn that and you jump on their journey, you are with them all the way on their journey. And you always have to be prepared for any kind of an incident or a feeling or a comment. And it's almost like being in a play, and learning your lines, because you have to be so prepared to jump into something. So, I mean, I don't coordinate that with being in a play, but I'm just saying that you have to always be prepared. You have to be prepared one step ahead of where they're at. That's hard to do, but you can start to learn those things because you can kind of perceive where they're going so that you can redirect or whatever means it takes to change where they are in their mind at that moment. And so there's a lot of techniques that I just have learned, I guess, on my own, that works best with Robin. Now, somebody else, it might be different.
You mentioned this, like, sort of you became a social worker in some ways, like exceptional at identifying resources and keeping track of everything and advocating and getting everyone what they need. So do you think a lot of people would not enjoy that? Is that just naturally you think that came easier to you and you taking on that role and helping
Yeah,
people in that way? Or,
just were you talking like the research and or are you
well, you
talking?
you said you had a lot of practice basically before
Yes.
Robin was diagnosed himself with your mom, helping her and with other things. So,
In fact, with my daughter, I was on a board as a parent and a community member for Magellan before that sunset, and they worked in the behavioral health system. And so, I mean, I was privileged to be able to do that and provide any information that they might have as from a parent of a child that was going through a lot of issues. So I tried to really get involved in, like that or some activities and just learn more about the condition. I would take classes. And as I did with Robin, I took classes. In fact, a funny story is that there were some classes that he could take with me. And so, I signed up for just about everything. So the way I could learn. So he came with me to this one class. And as it got started, I turned to him and I said, I'm not sure which one of us has Alzheimer's. And he looked at me and I said, because we've been to this class before. Well, let's stay and see if we learned anything.
nice. That's good reinforcement. So,
Yes.
what were some of, in terms of, you said earlier, your relationship, he was changing and he wasn't going back to the way he used to be. And so it sounds like you accepted that fully in some, would you agree with that?
I did. And in fact, he always told me because he felt uncomfortable if he went out and he might say something wrong. He says, let me know. And I did that for a while. And then finally, one of my sons said, I think it's time to stop doing that. So
Mm,
that's kind of when I did change to,
I see.
joining his journey.
Yeah.
I was trying
So
to honor Robin, but I understood where they were coming from and it made sense.
that's such a delicate balance that evolves, right? Honoring the person and their wishes, not wanting to lie, um, and wanting to tell them the truth, and but seeing where it is best serving them, whether you correct them or not. So eventually you.
Dr. Pauline Boss was in the community a few years back and I went to her class. And one of the things I learned was called ambiguous fibbing, which means it's okay to fib
Mm,
because whatever it is that's going to help them, instead of trying to correct them and bring them into the real world, that's not
yeah.
going to help. So you can fib about it and say, oh, yeah, oh, yes, we'll do that tomorrow or let's do that later. And then, of course, it's forgotten. But no, or you can redirect them. I mean, there were so many different techniques that I used. And I think one of the things, too, is just saying to them, if you see there's a disturbance of some sort, is I see something, it sounds like something's bothering you.
Mm,
Is there something that I can do to help you? Because it concerns me when you can't seem to kind of work through something. And I'd be happy to help you if you'd allow me to do so, which usually he did.
mhm. So he would share openly and respond to that question.
Yes, I can give a specific situation. He was standing there just kind of wringing his hands and kind of just a little bit of pacing. I said, and that's what I said to him. And he said, I've got to get a hold of this guy. And I said, really? I said, what, do you have the name of the guy? No, I don't know his name. I just have to get a hold of him and I have to get a hold of him today. And he was just going on about that. And I said, well, let's do this. Let's see if this will work. I'll call your boss and, dial the phone and then you can talk to him about this. Oh, that'd be really great. And then I said, oh my word, it's after 5 o'clock. His rule was, you do not disturb myself or my family after 5 o'clock. So I said, how about if we wait till morning and I'll call him first thing and I'll give you the phone and you can talk to him and help resolve the problem. Okay, that's good. And then he was fine. Well, sometimes they bring it up again, but you
Yeah.
go through the same scenario. So yeah, I mean, it's like you're an actress in a way because you have to assume this part that you don't usually have to do in a common situation with a spouse. You know, the language is different. The the looks, it's always important, I think, to look into their eyes when you're talking to them. You don't talk from behind. There's so many clues that can help someone that's getting into this process. It's a lot of, and again, it's different for everybody because Alzheimer's is different for everybody.
Was that a process for you to get comfortable with this creative improving?
I suppose, now when I look back and think about it, it probably was a little bit, but I found solutions that helped him feel better. Well, I think the other thing too is I was blessed that he was home during COVID. and I didn't have to be concerned about him in some place, that I couldn't get to him. But out of that, he became more dependent on me. If I go in the other room, where are you, Karen? Well, I'm just in the bedroom. I'll be right back, because it's like a child, when the parent leaves the room for a few
Yeah.
minutes. And so there was that, but I think he was really attached to me because he knew he could trust me. He could trust that whatever I would say or do would be the best thing for him, which was true.
Yeah. And from what I remember, would you agree, he had what we call sundowning?
S-
And maybe it
Yes,
was
he did.
not severe, but I think that's because you helped him through it with these approaches that you just described. Or
I think
maybe
it just kind of happened when I planned doctor's appointments between like 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock. That was his best time. And he always slept until about 10 o'clock. I never tried to get him out of bed until he was ready. And then, so that was his good time. That's when his brain worked the best and the hardest. And then it started like 5 o'clock, and then I got to be 4 o'clock where the sundowning started. And he just wanted to go to bed, so he'd go to bed about 7 o'clock. He would sleep 14, 15 hours. But I figured his brain needed that recovery time. I never tried to get him up.
So you had described, I forgot exactly how the words you used, but that there were sort of three trajectories happening. There was his journey, so to speak, your journey, and then the relationship, the together journey.
For just Robin and me, or you're talking about with the doctor?
No, just Robin and you. Like how things were changing over time as his disease progressed. So what came to me when you talked about that was the you, me, and us. And as a care partner and his wife of 50 plus years at that point, were you conscious of this evolution of your sense of yourself and your relationship and intentionally taking steps to nourish each of these three things?
I think so. And I was very blessed to have good friends. Robin and I would go out for lunch with people that knew he had Alzheimer's. And even if he had to go to the bathroom, the other male in the group would get up and say, "Oh, I got to go too," making it less obvious. But we did a lot of that. And I don't know, I got out pictures. We looked at pictures. The funniest story, of course, of all is that, well, during COVID, what I did, because being confined is hard because you just become so internalized into your room that you're in. So I made it a op thing that I would go out. We'd go out in the car and drive, even if it was to the bank or the post office or whatever. Every day we'd go somewhere. And then sometimes I would run out of places to go, and I'd say something about, and I used this after moments of distress too. I said, "How about we go get a Dairy Queen?" So the family, we still joke about that because he never liked sweets before he got Alzheimer's, and he had diabetes, so I had to watch his nutrition. But yes, let's go to the Dairy Queen. We haven't been there for weeks. Well, we might have gone 2 days before. And I know for my benefit, I had to go from the large size to the small size.
Yeah.
It was beginning to show. I think it was just kind of a funny thing. But you mentioned the Dairy Queen. That was kind of the calming thing that we could go and do together. And he would like that. It's hard to talk about this in the fact that when you've been married as long as we have, you just don't think about things. You just do things because it needed to be done, and you progressed with the relationship. I mean, I knew what the outcome would be for him at some point. And so we even had a person, I called him a transition person, but that took my son, my oldest son, Brett, and my son, Adam, wasn't able to come, but Brett and I went to the first place. This was so novel to me. This part was really difficult. And we toured the place, and we decided that that would be where we would place him. But it was about a year later because I thought I could still work with him. And Brett was so wonderful because he took him on the first day. I couldn't do that. And fortunately, we were blessed because they were having a luau or something like that going on. So Brett came back and he said, "I think he thinks he's on a cruise ship somewhere." So
Nice.
that was
Yeah.
a good thing.
tropical.
God blesses us in so many ways. We just have to stop and think about it because I have my Christianity. I feel I'm a strong Christian as I can be, and I try to be stronger. But I believe, and he was too. And I just believe that God was with us through all of this. And he gives us, even within the challenges, He gives us opportunities, and I tried to take every one of them.
That's a good segue into were there things that surprised you with the relationship, like moments of unexpected closeness or joy?
When he was getting close to the Sundowner's time, I'm not sure, but he, say, no, I don't want to do that or whatever. I said, okay, that's fine. I just thought I'd ask. So there were times when he would say no to things, and then I just had to accept that's what he didn't want to do. I wasn't going to press him to do anything. Again, like I say, I keep going back to the fact of being married for 60 years that you just get to know your care partner so well that you can even tell what they're thinking, even if they're in the state of Alzheimer's. I don't know, it's a feeling. It's just something in a marriage.
Yeah. I think of it as like that nonverbal or that energetic exchange. Were there things that surprised you, like that in some ways you grew even closer together?
Nothing specifically comes to mind. I just think that over the time that he would rely on me for so much more. And for me being there, I felt that was a blessing that I could be there for him. Other than that, I just, we lived each day, and I knew each day when I got up there was going to be changes. It's not going to be the same as yesterday, and it just keeps rolling and rolling. You just have to be ready to go with that flow. And it is tiring, but one of the ways I resolved that, and it was good for both of us, is we had good friends and relatives around family, and we would get together for lunch or dinner or something. And it was a good outing for him because it was an additional exposure to, he'd recognize the people and things like that. And so I think that kind of exposure, unless they're going to be the type of patient that would be outspoken or something like that, Robin wasn't that type of person. He was, as we talked about, was pretty easygoing and gentle. And so I was really blessed because I've heard so many different stories about people.
Were there any daily practices or rituals or mantras that you use to keep you in this calm, grounded place?
I think it's pretty basic for me. I had my morning meditation time and I had my evening meditation time. And of course, he was always in bed early. So, and I know he was sleeping later. So God blessed me with that time where I could talk to him and get on with my day. So I guess that was the only thing. I don't have any sayings or anything that I refer to other than reading in the Bible, feeling blessed that I had that relationship with the Lord.
Beautiful. And also, you already conveyed what a wonderful community of friends and family you have. And I know you yourself have good friends that you would talk to. So I know, you have had your own medical issues with cancer. And how did you balance those needs with his needs?
It's interesting because I was diagnosed in 2005 with breast cancer. I went into remission and then I got it again, and then later I got it again. And it has metastasized to my right hip and my lower back. No, to me it was such a blessing because I'd be in remission and I'd come out of it because then the cancer came back. But there was always something new medical, and I had fantastic doctor, and he was on top of everything. I don't know when I had to go and have radiation. My son took me. And the last time, that was when Robin was in his Alzheimer's mode. But before that, he would take me and we'd go out for lunch afterwards after maybe I had an infusion or whatever it might be. That I say is one of the 90-10 situations where he was 90% and I was 10%. So, I don't know, not that we didn't have our differences from time to time, but for the most part, I think we just learned from each other, the good things from each other, and we liked the good things from each other.
Wonderful. Maybe I know you have so much wisdom to share, including lessons you yourself have learned, even though you are so adept at finding resources, accessing resources, navigating the healthcare system. There was a lot that you learned along the way. And I'd love to go through some things that, looking back, what advice would you give to other care partners who are struggling in various ways?
I think the first thing I would do, because everybody's journey is different, I'd want to get to know the person. I'd want to get to know their journey, about themselves, their lives, to see where they're coming from. I can't just throw out advice.
Mhm.
because it might not be the right advice. So you have to always, and I've always done this in a lot of my relationships, is where are you at? Where are you coming from? What's going on? And then let's see what things that we can do that can help that situation. And so that would be my first premise is I would never go in and talk to somebody cold call and start handing out advice. I think that's not proper. But yeah, I think there are a lot of things that we can learn that I have learned. I mean, I even learned one thing, and I don't even know if this is a true fact with Alzheimer's because I've never asked anybody about it. I believe they have two visions. They have, like the eyeglass vision where they see things in front of them. But
Mhm.
if it's the second one is further away, everything kind of becomes ambiguous. And, like if you go to the restroom, I'd stand up so I'd raise my hand so he would see where I was sitting, or a friend would go with him, you know. And I think that those were some of the things that I didn't know. With Alzheimer's, you develop the brain develops a different kind of a vision than just your regular eyeglass vision, I would say. I don't know how to compare it.
Yeah.
And you know more about that than I would, if that's even true. But I just noticed that with him.
Mhm.
The further away he got from me, his sight was just more ambiguous.
Mm. Yeah.
But
Well, I just will add, there's the vision in the eyeballs and then the vision part of the brain.
that's how to define it.
And there's the visual cortex, so it's the occipital lobe. And then there's also visual spatial, visual perceptual. And so all these things can be affected by the Alzheimer's changes in the brain and can distort things in a variety of ways. And then in addition to in our eyes, as we age, obviously there's a number of things that come up: glaucoma, cataracts, macular degeneration. So and there's, usually there's multiple things at play. So that's interesting. And that's where everyone is different. And it's hard to evaluate someone's vision who has advancing Alzheimer's disease because as you're testing, you may not be getting like the information you're getting isn't necessarily,
Yeah, but I would say that that's the brain, the eye and the brain part. I know there's other facets as a doctor that you would look at, but those were the things that I was one of the things that I recognized with him. And so I just think that there's, a lot of things that we can do. You talked about talking to someone and sharing with them. I think there's a lot of concepts that are important to think about. I think humor is really important. Now, you have to depend on their personality. Maybe their personality has never been one that takes lightly to humor. I don't know. But I do think that diffuses situations. And sometimes that just kind of creates a moment of enjoyment,
mhm.
to tell a joke or I saw a funny thing on TV or something like that. And I think some other things are using positive stimulation. If he's going to, and I don't mean stimulation like getting them totally excited, but something that they would be interested in that's in a positive way and present it positively. And again, like I said before, look them in the eyes when talking with them. And I think the other thing too is sometimes people are afraid to maybe touch that person because they don't know if they're going to get upset.
Mm.
Well, if you stand in front of them and look at them, and then I know when we went to visit his sister before she passed away, she was in a chair and I got down on my knees and I said, "Kay, may I hold your hand for a little bit?" Yes, that would be nice. That sense of touch that we all need. We all need hugs and touch and stuff like that. And I think there's other things you can play music of their era that they like, or just even soft music that calms them down. Um, and then I think too, when you're working with them and being around them, is to smile as much as you can because they reflect what's on your face. That's what they see. So if you're smiling or if you're frowning, they know there's something different. So smile, show your pearly whites. There's so many different things. And I think the biggest thing is their dignity. And as you know, what I did with you when I would bring Robin in is because it would be like 3 months, I would type up something and bring it in or send it to you so you could look at it ahead of time so that you didn't have to ask Robin questions or you didn't have to ask me questions in front of Robin.
Mhm.
You kind of knew where everything was at. And I think that keeps the dignity for the person. And I refer to that as a three-legged stool. You have to have the doctor, you have to have the patient, and you have to have the care partner, and they have to be on the same team. And so as a care partner, I have responsibility to let the doctor know as much as possible beforehand. So so Robin could be helped in a better way. Because whenever Robin would go to the doctor and the doctor would come in and say, "Well, hi, Robin, how are you doing?" "Well, I'm doing just great,"
Yeah.
which I'm sure you probably hear from a lot of people. But I just think those are some of the connecting things that are truly important and, things that we can learn just by, it may be things that people use every day, but
Mhm.
they don't realize how important it is in that relationship at that time. We have to slow down. You go
Mm.
fast, it bothers them. Their brain can't work that fast. Their brain gets tired. I don't know. I did the best that I thought I could. And
I don't.
I have a couple of regrets because there was one time I got upset with him. And then a little bit later, I asked him to forgive me, and he said, "For what?" So I thought, well, okay, he's forgotten about that one.
Right.
But, there's just, because you're human, there's things that go on. But yeah, our family and our friends have been so supportive. And even after the fact, I still go for lunch once or twice a week with different friends. They come from different parts of our life, and we just share.
Yeah. Wow. So you really were able to step, like you're saying, like step into his world. And the way you describe it is took me years to get that about interacting with someone who's going through these diseases and how I imagine they're experiencing the world. And you were able to embrace that, which is can be really hard for people to let go of the past.
We don't want our loved one to change. We want them to be back the way they were. And until the care partner gets to that point where they realize it's not going to change, the best thing to do is just walk beside them on their journey. Enjoy them while you've got them, let them love you, and do some things that maybe, like Robin used to like woodworking. And I know there was one question you asked is when I first discovered that he had it that was really poignant. We were living in Sun City and he was going to go somewhere on a get something or whatever. And all of a sudden he called me and he said, "Karen, I don't know where I am." Oh, my heart sank. That was just this out of the blue and that. And I'd said, "Okay, can you see any signs around you? Tell me some things that look familiar. A road sign, a building or something like that." Because I said, "I'll find it." And we didn't have GPS, or anything like that. So I did find him and then he followed me home. But that was really the first awareness. And what was so ironic about that is in all his traveling, he did a lot of driving. He could go into Los Angeles and find where he needed to be, whatever the address was. He could
Mm.
just get there. He had that knowledge. He liked to do crossword puzzles and jigsaw puzzles. And I always tell people with his crossword puzzles, he always did in ink because he never put it down unless he knew it was the word. And he'd finish them. And, even his family always had jigsaw puzzles around on the table. And people would come in, guests or whatever, people would sit down and put the puzzles together, and I was not a real puzzle person, though, I have to admit. But they finally figured me out because I would take a piece from the puzzle and I'd put it in my pocket. And finally they said, "Karen, it's time to put the last piece in the puzzle."
Oh my goodness. That's great.
Anyway, there's the humor, they just knew me, and
Yeah.
so they didn't know which piece I had taken. That was, but I mean, all the things that he used to like he was very detailed because he did a lot of architectural drafting and all those are the things that slowly went away from him. And we're just sad to see. Sometimes he'd go sit out in the garage where all his tools were and he would just sit there. I don't know
Mm.
what he was thinking, but he didn't do anything. He'd get up and he'd come back in. So, he said, "I'm going out in the garage," because that's what he used to always say when he was doing something. "I'm going out in the garage." "Okay, fine." But he would just be sitting there because I'd check on him sometimes and he's just sitting there. Then pretty soon he'd come in or I'd say it's time for lunch or something like that. So I don't know what went on in his mind at times like that of things that he lost.
So maybe I could wrap up with what do you want the world to better understand about the care partner experience, specifically as it relates to these kind like Alzheimer's and similar diseases?
One of the things I did not mention is make sure that if you decide to not keep your person at home, your loved one, and if you're looking for a place, always be cognizant of what's going on. The one we chose was really good at first. Then they changed directors, they changed other people. I was so, that's one thing I would say, I was such a novice in all of that. I look back now and I have a friend who is, her mother was in the same memory care, and we've been friends ever since, and we go to lunch. But we're so frustrated about the system in general, the laws in general, as far as I wrote a 9-page letter, it was cathartic for me anyway, to the Department of Health Services about all the things that were wrong. But I did that after the fact. And I just think that if had I known that there's so many agencies out there, the Area Agency on Aging, if you're working with the hospital, there's social workers that can help to go in and analyze what's going on in the facility if things aren't going well. And so I think that's something that I learned I would do differently. I would have taken him out of there. I don't know if I would have just brought him home and had somebody come in at home, take care of him a little bit, or if I'd taken him to a smaller facility. I didn't investigate long enough. This one just looked really nice. And the staff, we were talking to all of the patients there, and say, well, we're going to go down and look at a room. You want to come and join us, making it seem like family. But it changed so quickly and so many things were happening that it was the overwhelming thing, I think, out of the whole thing for me was not finding the best place for him at his end of life. And to even say that the doctor that serviced the facility, nice man, called me. Robin passed away on a Thursday. He called me on the following Tuesday to talk about Robin's care. They had not even notified that doctor that Robin had passed away. He did not know what to say. I felt so sorry for him, So constantly be on the alert. If there's changes when you're at home and you need to call the doctor's office, call them. Reach out for help. Find the resources. Use your family members for maybe transportation or friends. There's so many things that we always think we can do everything by ourselves, and we cannot. We need I guess the saying is a village. Well, I didn't need a village. I need a few good people. And so, yeah, but I'm so glad my sons were, helpful and being there for me. And my one son, Brett, is only about 3 miles from us. And my other son, like I said, Adam is in Ketchikan. But we would talk, and he didn't know us what to do. But you know what he did? He bought me a massage. He thought that would be really super.
Nice.
So,
Definitely.
I mean, even if you're far away, you can do certain things. And so, yeah, I'm blessed. I have wonderful family, wonderful friends. I'm blessed because with my breast cancer, was diagnosed in 2005. Now it's 25. It's 20 years I've had it off and on. And my doctor said that I'm in the 15 percentile of people that have lived this long with cancer. So I feel God's blessing me to do something. Maybe this is one of the things, I don't know. But, to have a purpose, after Alzheimer's, to have a purpose. So anyway,
Beautiful.
I thank you for this opportunity. I think it's been fun, and I hope that people that listen to this have questions, maybe to contact you and talk to you about it and, see what you can do to help them.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So much wisdom, and your positivity is really something extraordinary. Thank you for that now and also throughout knowing you and Robin. I've gained so much and continue to. It's an honor to have you here today. And yes, if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, care partners that don't know where to go, don't know where to start, overwhelmed, email me at Dr. Cabral, that's DRCABRAL at mybrainlove.com. And otherwise, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Karen. If you are listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe and comment. If you're listening on the podcast platforms, please rate and review and follow the show. And yeah, thank you again and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. You have a blessed day. It was my pleasure.